Hi, welcome to the RedState Weekly Briefing. I'm your host, Aaron Gardner, and this week I just want to start off by saying to everyone, thank you so much for watching the RedState Weekly Briefing. We've been doing this for a few months now, like 6 months now, and 7 months actually, I believe, and we have got a good following. We have hundreds of you who watch each week, and we appreciate that. And I just wanted to throw that out there at the very beginning of the show. Thank you. I'm sure Pope Sparkles is out there on Twitter already wondering what we're doing and calling us out for what we're doing wrong. So I just wanted to start the Red State Weekly Briefing with that. And with that, let me go ahead and introduce who we have on this week. As always, we have Thomas LaDuke running the show, producing it for us. I'm calling it for FTR Radio during the week as a rebroadcast.
I'm not going to talk Ebola, or I'm putting this knife in my head, Gardner. Do you understand me? It's in my skull.
Well, it better be. It's better that you stick that knife in your skull than we allow Ebola to run rampant across the United States. Why do you hate America?
Oh, yes, I forgot. It always comes back to why do I hate America? That's right.
Exactly. You communists in Detroit, I'll tell you. You and your human right water.
Right.
We're kind of going off the rails right off the bat here, though, don't you think?
Yeah, invite Mr. Attitude. Bring him in.
Yeah, let's go ahead and introduce Joe. Joe, how you doing this weekend? I saw on the Twitters that you went and saw Sesame Street live, so I'm glad you're here with us now.
It was touch and go there for a while, fellas. It was definitely touch and go there for a while.
I have to pause myself. You guys talk amongst yourselves for a moment, and I'm gonna back out for just a minute. Go ahead.
Well, while Aaron adjusts himself because he doesn't want to do it on camera, Joe, why don't you go ahead and explain how it is that you went to go see Sesame Street live, and then you ripped my head off pre-show.
Okay, well, I was at Sesame Street Live because I have a 2.5-year-old who loves Elmo and got to meet Elmo before the show. And Elmo, surprisingly, is not 2 or 3 feet tall like you see on TV, but is actually about 6 feet tall and scary as hell.
Oh.
And little children were running around terrified that this giant Elmo and this giant Bert walked in.
Wait. So if Elmo is like 6 feet tall, that must make Big Bird like 13 feet tall, like a giant velociraptor with feathers.
Big Bird was still the same size he appears to be on TV, but remember Elmo's been like 3 years old for 50 years, so I'm really thinking he might be a pedophile, which explains that puppeteer getting those allegations a couple years back.
That is a good and interesting point. I'm glad we could start with that. So Elmo is quite possibly a pedophile, just like his puppeteer may or may not have been, according to the allegations. Let's throw out as many key words that the lawyers can't sue us with as possible.
And
there.
Let me just add that I support 2012 Mitt Romney's plan to defund all of Sesame Street.
Oh, there we go. Nice swinging.
Oh my gosh.
No. Yeah.
Well, as long as it's a 2000 plan and not some new budding 2016 Romney plan, I'm okay with it.
Mitt Romney ran in 2016 solely to defund Sesame Street, I'm there. I am on Team Mitt.
Don't lie, you're already.
I'm gonna have to really rethink Joe's position on the Red State Weekly Briefing right now. But this does lead us into some. It does segue well into the horse race segment. So let's go ahead and talk about elections for a second and talk about some of the news coming out. We have some big polls coming out. We have the NBC Marist poll. We have the YouGov poll. And there's some other polling out throughout the week that we should probably talk about as well. So, Joe, let me kick it over to you, and let's start off with Georgia, because there's been a lot of talk about Georgia. There's been a lot of talk about the polling there and the possibility of Georgia going to a runoff election. So let's talk about that for a minute, Joe. Go ahead.
Georgia is extremely interesting right now, and Eric has written on this several times at Red State. our boss and dear leader, and
that would be Eric Erickson, who has his own radio show on WSB out of Atlanta and is also a Fox News contributor.
Yes, that guy. He that kind of important figurehead that we have here at Red State. He's been writing a lot on this, and it's something that he's noticed, and something that I think actually makes a lot of sense, is that one of the reasons the polling looks weird in like Georgia and some of these other states is because there's no voter turnout polling. There's
exit polling.
Exit polling. God, words today elude me. There's no exit polling for a lot of these states, and so they have no 2012 baseline to go by. And so you see some polls are showing Michelle Nunn up +2, and some are showing David Perdue up +2, and some show it even closer than that. Some show it a little wider. I think one of these two that came out today has actually, of the two that came out, NBC, I believe, has I think NBC Marist had Perdue. I think that was one that had Perdue up and had, and the other one had Nunn up. It was like a weird back and forth between those two. There's no consensus in terms of what kind of polling sample you take here. And
right,
so,
and another thing about the polling and the lack of exit polling for certain states that we're seeing odd polling in. Another part of this is that you have pollsters who are trying to guess the electorate, and they went heavy one way in 2010 and they missed the mark. They went heavy another way in 2012 and have missed the mark. And so now they're trying to guess somewhere in between, and some are relying on 2012 exits, some aren't. And that's why you're getting this crazy mix in places like Alaska, Georgia, and there's probably about 7 other states that you could rattle off that didn't have the exit polling. I don't have the list here in front of me, but continue, Joe, on Georgia specifically.
And so on Georgia, what we're seeing is this really weird kind of back and forth in the polls. Like the average is changing constantly because it's if you look at the last several, let's see, CBS YouGov, the one that's out today, has Perdue up +3. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution had one that has Perdue up +2. Then the 4 before those, 3 of them had Nunn up +2 or 3, and one of them had a tie between the two. So it's really, really like weird back and forth polling between those two. Now, if you listen to Eric and you believe what he says, and I try to because he's much smarter than I am, he's fairly certain that because of the existence of a libertarian candidate there, that there is going to be a runoff, and their runoff is actually going to be in January. So
what?
You're going to see a runoff. Yeah, they have this election coming up in November. It's going to go to a runoff between David Perdue and Michelle Nunn, with the Libertarians sucking away enough of the votes to make that a runoff. And so what you're going to see is a runoff in January. And Eric is predicting Perdue in that one. I'm kind of leaning the same way because, again, I don't think, based on a couple conversations I've had, I don't think that any Democrat is going to get elected in the South in 2014 if they're not an incumbent already, and even the incumbents are facing a lot of trouble down here.
All right, let me ask, because I am the voice of the people, and for the people across the country that little shot.
God, the people are screwed.
Oh. Okay, January. When are they? When is the new Congress sworn in?
Like immediately after that election?
Yeah, January, like January 20th.
No.
So
they're sworn in. No, they are generally sworn in like the first or second week of January. So when is this runoff held then?
I think the runoff is held. I don't know. Probably.
You'd probably want to check with Green Papers. And Green Papers has all the information on when runoff elections and stuff like that. The oddities of elections for any states, they have it listed.
Potentially, then, you could have, if this runoff election, if it goes to this like Eric's predicting, goes to January, you could actually have the new Congress sworn in Georgia not having a sitting U.S. senator. And then decided if it's 50-50, and then all hell's going to break loose?
Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. Yes. While that is a possibility, it's probably the same sort of possibility as any one of us three getting Ebola. It's not that likely because there's reasons why. Because I mean, and we're going to talk about this more throughout this segment. But the reasons why is we're seeing the indications of a late blooming GOP wave. Actually, we're seeing the indications that the wave has been there right underneath the surface the whole time, and that it's now starting to swell, and we're probably going to see people get dragged over the line who we didn't expect to get dragged over the line. Not necessarily in every area, but we will see that. So I don't think we'll be put into a position where control of the Senate becomes dependent upon Georgia or Virginia or North Carolina, honestly.
And on us down here in Louisiana. The runoff for Georgia is, I believe, January 6th, if I'm reading the Secretary of State website correct.
Yes, so the runoff would probably be decided before they actually are sworn in at any rate. But that's a good question. It's something that I didn't think of.
I come up with good questions, Aaron, because once again, I'm the voice of the people.
You're the people's voice. You're the people's champ. Not much unlike The Rock.
No, I was like 4.99 when I boxed. I wasn't very good, but I am the voice. Yeah, the people.
That's good.
Thank you.
Good. Well, I appreciate you being the representative of the people when I came to Detroit. It surely saved my life.
And I got you free Mountain. What more can I do for you?
Yeah, free Mountain Dew from there's a casino in Detroit. You can get free Mountain Dew there. Don't even have to spend any money, but you can if you want. So Joe,
Please stop dying in a year.
I know. It's the Ebola. It's got me already. I made that pronouncement, and here I am. Even the Lord couldn't sink this ship. But Joe, with Georgia, if it goes to a runoff, I mean, clearly it's the historical trend is that Purdue would end up being the winner. Yes.
Yeah, and that's based on history. It's based on the fact that, once again, the primary Democratic vote in Georgia would be the minority black vote, and they don't turn out in these elections generally, and especially during a runoff like that. Just culturally speaking, it's something that doesn't happen. So if it does go to a runoff, and I think what Eric was mentioning on his radio show at one point was it seems like now the Purdue campaign was banking on a runoff, and they've been outspent by Michelle Nunn in the metro Atlanta area, and she's going to be almost tapped out by the time that runoff happens, while Purdue will still have a pretty fat bank account. So there's loads of elements going in there that will probably more than likely show a Purdue victory on that one. And similar, you're not going to see, I don't think, a runoff in the Georgia governor race. I think you're going to see Nathan Deal beat Jason Carter, not handily, but well enough to avoid anything significant there.
Now, what else? Now, one other thing that we have, and I want to get into this before we move and talk about Colorado Senate. But one of the big things that we had this weekend was the generic ballot. Has shifted much to the GOP's favor. From what I understand, GOP now shows an 11-point lead in the generic ballot. That's something like 4 points greater than what we had in September, and it's also, I believe, 5 points greater than what we had in 2010. Is that correct, Joe? Something like that?
Yeah, something like that. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. Yeah, it's a huge shift, and it's kind of showing. And again, it kind of ties back to that fact that we don't have, we're missing from maybe a quarter of our state's exit polling data, and so we may have always had these indicators of a bigger wave than we skeptically thought, but it looks like that it's actually starting to pull together, and there might actually be a wave coming up, and so the GOP is set to actually have a pretty good year after all, and it's a year where they really could use it, because if you remember when we had Brandon Finnegan from Ace of Spades headquarters decision desk, when we had him on the air, he was saying the GOP doesn't get a chance like this for another 6 years.
Right.
All the stars are kind of aligned. All the weakest Democrats in the strongest red states are up for re-election. This would be the year that they have to take those.
And also this is the year that we have to have a lot of victories so that we are set up properly for 2016.
Mm-hmm.
What we do now affects the 2016 environment greatly. So we want to be aware of that, and we want to take as many as we can. So the fact that we're seeing this now, and this is why I call this a late blooming wave. I've been of the opinion myself that this has been there underneath the whole time, and that honestly we've seen a lot of the pollsters hedging more towards 2012 than 2010, and that's why we're only seeing this stuff now, because this is the hard edge of it. We could see a huge wave. I mean, I've heard people say at this point that 10 seats, 10 pickups aren't out of the question. So it's a big thing when you're considering that we only need 6, I believe, to take the majority. Joe.
Yeah, and it's not just showing up in that Senate race, but you're seeing congressional races that are kind of turning, and you're seeing big shifts in even gubernatorial races, like in Texas, where all of a sudden the woman that Daily Kos bragged was only 9 points behind at one point, in the latest YouGov poll is now down 53-35 to Greg Abbott, so nearly 20 points. And let's see, let's see, what's 35? What's 53 minus 35? Anybody who's good at math, it's not
Aren't
me.
you a teacher?
English teacher. I teach kids to say words. I don't teach them to count. I don't do Common Core.
88, dude. 12%.
Well, okay, good enough for me. And with men in that poll, down 57-33. With women, Wendy Davis is down by 12 points. Greg Abbott has 49% of women. Wendy Davis has 37%.
Now I want to just say this. To keep this in perspective, okay, Wendy Davis is down 12 points with women, okay, and she is the abortion Barbie feminism candidate, okay. Now, to keep this in perspective, in the Colorado Senate race, where the female vote is absolutely critical, Cory Gardner is only down 11 with women, and he's actually leading men by 15, thus destroying the entire gender gap. Mm-hmm. So just to tell you how horrible of a candidate that Wendy Davis is, and it all goes back to her support for late-term abortion and abortion totally unrestricted. That should tell people something. The war on women is absolute BS, and we're going to see it crumble after November 4th. We are.
Absolutely. And then turning to another gubernatorial race, I'm doing this to tie into your state. NBC News Marist poll has Governor Hickenloopen, or Hickey Bopper, or whatever we decided his name was, has him up +5, but in that same poll has, I think Udall is down in that poll. I remember, yeah. In that poll, Gardner's up +1, and it's not much better for Udall in the YouGov poll, who is only up +1 in that one, I think. And so Udall is trailing behind where other Democrats are voting in these same polls.
Yeah,
so
Udall has actually lost between September and now with both the NBC and CBS YouGov poll. The NBC Marist poll, he's lost 7 points since September. In the CBS YouGov poll, he's lost 2 points since September. In the NBC Marist poll, one of the critical things that's going on here is that Udall only leads Hispanics by 4 points. It's literally 44-48 with Hispanics. Mark Udall or Cory Gardner and Mark Udall, with Udall leading by just 4. That's not enough for Udall to win. It's simply not enough. And what we're seeing from the ballot returns so far, the Republican margins, the lead that they have, almost 80,000 ballots so far, it's so much that it basically makes it to where we need less than 35% of independents in order to win the statewide election. So there's some interesting things and interesting dynamics. And I want to say on the YouGov poll, which had Hickenlooper leading, we've seen Hickenlooper basically leading Bob Beaupre throughout going back and forth. There was a little bit of a lead for Bob Beaupre, a little bit of a lead for Hickenlooper. We don't know exactly where it is. It's a tight race. But I will tell you, one thing that happened this week, that happened after these polls were taken, so they're not represented in here, is that Hickenlooper actually came out and basically said that, there's some good sex offenders who he would trust to work in jobs around children, and it wouldn't he wouldn't think it should affect their parole, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then he also went on to basically kind of say that statutory rape isn't really rape. So those two things we could see show up and be reflected in this next batch of polling if there is another poll in the next week from any groups. We won't know for sure, though, until Election Day. But as it stands right now, the GOP has a big edge in ballots being turned in, and Colorado is going to be a state to watch, but I think we're going to be able to call it early because of the all-mail ballot election.
And the last particular race I want to call out is the Kansas race, because it has been so weird in terms of what's going on there. We've seen the quote-unquote independent candidate Orman up over Pat Roberts for most of the race since the Democrat tried to drop out and couldn't. But Roberts is now only down 1, as opposed to being down 5 or 6 points like he was when this race really started getting underway. Now, there's only like 9 days left, so there is a chance that he could overcome that. Who knows? But narrowing a gap to just 1 within the margin of error is pretty significant for the Roberts campaign, which has been struggling after a very nasty primary process for Republicans.
Yeah, it was a nasty primary process. And I got to say, that's one of the things that I think it has managed to help Colorado out, is that we didn't have a huge divisive primary, and we didn't have a primary that was late in the season either. Kansas kind of had both of those things, and for them, I think it really has affected it. And I believe also Brownback hasn't really been doing all that great and hasn't really had the coattails that you would expect to be able to help anybody either.
Exactly. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was caught off. My kid tried to walk into the room. So. No
worries. And the last race, Joe, that we should really just even talk about just a little bit, I suppose, is Alaska. And I don't necessarily want to talk too much about this race, but just the state in general being a weird and quirky place. The polling that comes out of there, you get like somewhere around 70 to 80% cell phone as the way that the means that they poll, because of how disparate it is and how crazy it is there, and you have small patches of communities and no big things, no big infrastructure anywhere. But you basically had this last week. You had Sarah Palin endorse an independent candidate instead of Sean, what was his name? Sean Parnell, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And this was all because of an oil regulation thing. And it just seems so weird to me that you would have this tight race in Alaska, and then you'd have Sarah Palin injecting politics into the overall environment, even though it's not the Senate race, with something like oil and gas regulations, where she's actually coming more so down on the side of the state-owned and run agenda rather than the free market. It really is something.
And what's the guy that she supported? What was that? The name of that ticket, or whatever, the Democratic Republican
I don't even remember
ticket or whatever. It's something weird. It's basically it's some sort of moderate ticket that is apparently leaning towards some Democratic issues like an oil tax. So that's just weird, and it comes at a time where we've had the Palins thrown at us so much this week that I just, anytime their names come up, I've kind of checked out on that one.
Yeah, well, I actually put out on Twitter this week that basically any minute that I spend defending a Palin, no matter what it is 1 minute I can't spend going after an incumbent Democrat. So I understand that people.
There's plenty of air in the room. That's garbage.
No, that's my personal thing.
That's your personal.
You can choose your personal thing and have it. Well, yeah. How are you going to say it's dumb? I'm doing my job and doing my thing. I'm not going to waste time on that.
In the room to talk about two separate things.
Yeah, but you know what? There's also plenty of people out there talking about two separate things, so I don't need to.
Well, that's a lot different than saying it's a waste of time.
It's a waste of my time is what I'm saying.
Everything's a waste of your time.
Well, okay. What's not a waste of my time is religious liberty. And I want to talk about that for a little bit.
You know
here.
who believes in religious liberty?
Who's that?
Sarah Palin.
She does. She does. She absolutely does believe in religious liberty. Her ideas on oil and gas perplex me, but on religious liberty, I think she's solid, and I think she would agree with me that it's awful.
Defending her, you're wasting your time.
No, I think I'm using her as a segue, is what I'm doing. I think it's awful that Wendy Davis is out palling around with who was it? The mayor of Houston who tried to subpoena the sermons of Christian churches. She's going to church. Wendy Davis went to church with this mayor in Houston. That's incredibly crazy to me that happened. But this religious assault, this assault on religion, I guess I should say, by Democrats has been going on ever since Obama came to office. It was even put and implemented into Obamacare to directly go after things like the Catholic Church and the charity hospitals that they run, things like Hobby Lobby, things like people who want to bake cakes, everything in society that is touched upon morality and religious freedom. The way that it's going right now, we don't have it anymore. That liberty's being taken away, and it freaks me out. Now, LaDuke,
Yes.
what do you? I mean, I know you are the people's voice, as we established earlier.
I am the voice.
You're definitely someone who believes in liberty and freedom and rights and all of that. And what do you?
Unless I invited you.
Exactly. What do you think about a city government subpoenaing these sermons of a church?
I think what they should do is I actually read that some of the pastors in Houston and everything were sending Bibles and then sermons that they had done in the past, just sending them kind of like willy-nilly. That's what I think they should do. They should just overload City Hall with teachings from the pulpit that they've done over the past 20 years and say, there you go, have fun.
That's what Huckabee said as well. Just drown them in paper. Send them every sermon from every pastor in the country.
It's absolutely asinine that they even brought this up. This is purely an intimidation tactic. And hopefully it backfires in a state like Texas. And, this gal is only going to be, a one-termer because that's just idiotic. I don't give a damn what your political affiliation is.
Well, you're definitely right, and I'm sure in a place like Texas, we probably will see a backlash. But this sort of thing, no city mayor, no low-level employee in Cincinnati does something without thinking that it would be accepted by someone like Barack Obama in office, allowing them and setting the example of this sort of stuff. And while we may get a pushback in Houston, where's the national pushback? Where are people literally saying to the government, you guys have gone way too far on the separation of church and state. You've gone to the point to where you've separated the ability of a Christian to live a Christian life in public. Is awful. And when are we going to all stand up, libertarians, conservatives, blue blood Republicans, and just say enough is enough and take this back?
So are you thinking lawsuits? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it could go lawsuits. The fact is the left uses lawfare all the time against us. I think we should pick up the tools that are there, pick up the weapons that are on the battlefield, and start using them. And I think also, you need to have pastors and priests and churches who are willing to say, you know what, we're going to preach, and we're going to preach it no matter what. And if you don't like it, too dang bad. And if that means saying from the pulpit, this candidate supports an evil abomination of a practice, and you should not take the sacraments or take communion or, you know, vote for this guy or whatever. If you support him, you should not be thinking that you're doing God's will. I think pastors should be allowed to do that.
If a Latino church had a sermon where they said that Tom Tancredo doesn't want us here in this country, they wouldn't subpoena his sermons.
Right. No, they wouldn't. Not at all.
If a mosque said that X politician is anti-Islam, they wouldn't subpoena theirs either. It's not an attack on religion. It's an attack on Christianity.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Because you know what? I guarantee you there's mosques in Houston that are also preaching against homosexuality, and I'm guessing they weren't part of the subpoena.
Okay, so nobody knows if they were or not then.
What do I look like, a lawyer?
Well, you kind of do. You kind of got that Tupac vibe lawyer
I do
look to
that
you.
lawyer, yeah.
He kind of looks like he just got back from the mosque.
I just got back from outside.
So that's a great point. If they didn't actually include the Muslim faith, why didn't they then? I mean, what's the problem?
Well, yeah, I mean, their fig leaf is going to be because they weren't specifically talking about a particular ballot measure, and or their fig leaf is going to be we didn't see large numbers of Muslims signing the petition, so we can deduce that they weren't encouraging people to sign it.
Right.
Right. But that's not an excuse to subpoena a sermon, and certainly not an excuse to subpoena a blanket amount of all sermons that have to do with the question of homosexuality. That's preposterous.
And not only that, but you got to think about the retaliation that's going to come against these churches, not just from the government, but from the activist homosexual left. We saw it happen when Proposition 8 in California. We saw people who had donated money to that become political targets of the left.
Of course, everybody's a target of the left. Everybody that does something that the left doesn't approve of becomes a personal target. They do not attack ideas. The left attacks individuals. They don't attack the thesis of the church. They attack the church itself. That's what leftists do. They don't care about attacking your argument or having a better argument. They care about trashing the individual or institution.
I think you're absolutely right, and I should back up and tie this point to what we disagreed about earlier, and I will concede the argument to you that the Palin story is important to the extent that you're right. This is an example of them attacking a target, attacking an individual, and trying to tear down that person to delegitimize the ideology that that person
One thing
also
people on the
has.
right
So I will give you that.
It doesn't matter if you like Sarah Palin or not. The reason they're attacking her is because they assume she is of the right. And if they'll do it to her, they'll do it to anybody else, and the next time it could be somebody you like.
I think you're absolutely right, and I shouldn't have made light of it. But me personally, like I said, I choose to do other stuff with my time just because these Palin fights, they do drag me down. They make me feel pissed off about how they get treated, and I try not to go that route because if you take in so much of that, oftentimes it just makes you feel ill and sick to your stomach that there's so much
not everybody has to do it.
Who accepts it.
It is important to defend the people who are standard bearers, even if you didn't select them, even if you didn't vote on who was going to be your standard bearer. There is a collective understanding of who those people are. I mean, look what they did to Dana Lash the day her book came out. They tried to attack her, and now they're trying to attack her for this school shooting. Right.
And let's go ahead and talk about that for just a second as another example of this. Dana Lash, she has a great new book out called Hands Off My Gun, and everybody should go out and check it out. And you know what, Caleb, do me a favor.
You want to get it at Barnes & Noble. Go to Barnes & Noble to purchase it.
Yeah, and also, Caleb, if you can make sure to get us a link for that, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes so that people will have access to that as well. So make sure to go out and get the book. But this is true. The left has continuously tried to tear down Dana Lash. We've seen them use horrible terms to describe her, just straight sexism, and just disgusting things. And it's all because she stands up, and she is a standard bearer for us. She has been ever since the Tea Party got started, and she was there with Breitbart in the early times as well. I know LaDuke, you know Dana, and I know you respect her as well. It's amazing what they've tried to do to personalities like her and Michelle Malkin and others.
Yeah, well, LaDuke, you've been part of the whole Breitbart crew all along. Back when Dana was right at the top of the Breitbart list, there, isn't that right?
No, I mean, I got to spend some time with Andrew and everything, but Dana and Andrew were really good friends. I was lucky enough to occasionally hang out with Andrew and Dana too. And the one thing I want to point out about this is that what you guys have said is right. In some of the attacks that they use on people like Dana, it's the very thing that they accuse us of. And the irony is so palatable, you could cut it with a chainsaw and still not get through it. So it always amuses me that the very things that they'll say about somebody like Dana Lash, who is standing up and saying what she believes and actually backing things up with facts, they will go after these people in the very ways that they always accuse us of doing.
Absolutely.
And irony is never lost on me, but it's always lost on them because they're lost.
Yeah, and a good example of that actually in a different tangent here. Charles C.W. Cook from National Review. He has an op-ed up in the New York Times today. It was absolutely excellent, and it was talking about the African American Second Amendment rights. Are they truly equal? And he went through some of the old history and showed how most of the gun control laws, the first gun control laws in America, were basically to keep the guns out of the hands of the slaves and the Indians. And he went through and noted all this stuff, and it's so amazing because once again, there's this disconnect, between the reality of history and what the Democrats and the progressives have stood for, and what they're pitching to society. And the irony is amazing that they then project all of that evil that they're responsible for onto conservatives and onto the Republican Party, when we're the party that first came up with civil rights.
Keep Darky down.
Did you
Logan's
mention the attack Media Matters made on Dana?
No, we haven't mentioned that yet. I know you wrote a great post on that, and Dana had you on to speak about it, didn't she?
No. She's on her book tour actually. I don't think she's actually doing her own show right now because she's on the book tour.
I know she tweeted it out though.
Yes, yeah. They're New York, Florida, like that. They're all over the place. But yeah, what Media Matters did was what they went through and what they put up a post, which immediately, of course, everyone on the left latched onto. It got 1 million retweets and Facebooks that Dana had misquoted the Founding Fathers in her book, which of course she had not. And so I just took each quote that they said was misquoted and put it in the historical references and context, and I put in the sources, and it was just obvious. I mean, you can be for gun control all you want till the end of the day, but you can't go back in time and make other people agree with you retroactively. They didn't. Right. That's just how it is. It may be an inconvenient truth, but it's the truth nonetheless. The Founding Fathers believed, as pretty much everybody did in those days, that the individual citizen had the right to protect themselves through arms if necessary. That's what they believed. That's just how it was. Sorry.
And, to wrap this back around to where this discussion originally started with religious liberty, we have the same thing. We have the progressives going back in time and trying to revise what actually occurred and what the Second Amendment was and what the wall of separation between church and state was in Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptists. It's the same exact thing. Instead of them realizing that churches were allowed to be involved in the public and political arena, and that it's the government that's not allowed to be involved in the church arena, they've switched it all around. You go back to our founding, to the Revolution. The revolution was inspired in the church pews of America. We had the black-robed regiments, is what they were called. And they were absolutely critical to the revolution early on and to inspiring people to achieve liberty and freedom under God.
And they've done a brilliant job of it. This has been a campaign for 50 to 60 years, possibly even a little bit longer, and they've done a brilliant job of it to basically say that somehow there is a inherent separation of church and state to where there can be no mention of anything to do with anything spirituality or something that is sanctioned by a church in the public square. And if you just take it from a tactical point of view, you really have to take a step back and admire the sons of bitches, because they've done it well to the point that it's taught in schools now as that this is exactly what the founders wanted.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I could admire the fact that they've managed to pull the wool over generations of Americans' eyes. But, you know, the truth of the matter is we need to be encouraging people to take that step back further from Jefferson, back further from Danbury Baptist, and go all the way back to Locke, and just basically say, you know, the church realm and the realm of government, the civic realm, the civil realm, and the church realm are two different things. And they have ways that they can work together, but, you know, one is never going to control the other. And that Lockean view is what inspired Jefferson in the first place in his letter to the Danbury Baptists.
Aaron, I just want to follow up on that. When you said after I just spoken that I was right, if my lips are moving, I am. Just so we're clear on that for future.
Well, as the voice of the people, I assume that is not true. As you know, the people have done some very stupid things.
The people agree with me, Aaron.
Well, the people are on your side. They're not on Obama's side, though. Obama has been falling in the polls a great deal, and it's really hurt him. And one of the reasons that he's probably falling in the polls is that he's not very responsive to what the American people are saying nowadays. On one issue in particular, a travel ban from companies or from countries where Ebola is in an outbreak stage. Something like 60%, 70% of the United States believe we should go ahead and institute a travel ban or a quarantine, a mandatory quarantine of 21 days for anybody coming back from one of these Ebola-stricken countries. Recently, we've seen nonpartisan, or I should say bipartisan efforts by states such as New Jersey and New York to start, and even Illinois and Chicago, to start introducing a quarantine at the state level. Now, what's interesting about this is the White House has begun already to push back against the states and their quarantines. This brings up all sorts of issues. I mean, number one, why is the administration so adamant against any sort of precautionary measure for Ebola? Why are they so adamant against taking these steps? It's ridiculous. You know, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure, or something like that, they say. Why are we not applying those simple sort of principles right now? And then the other thing I wanted to say on that. Well,
you know what people say, Aaron? People say that, oh, you know, you're causing a panic. I think exactly the opposite. I think if the government steps in and overreaches and over-quarantines and over-bans, that's not going to cause a panic. That's going to cause people to go, okay, well, then everything's taken care of.
Right. Well, you know,
it's the underwhelming response that caused panic.
Exactly, and the reason why they can get it, the reason why so many people let them get away with this idea that quarantine will cause a panic is because they believe, once again, that every Tea Partier out there has loads of ammo stocked away and MREs stocked away and canned food, and we're all preppers and we're all just waiting for the next civil war and the next revolution. Right? Yeah. Well, yeah. But, you know, that's not how we think. We like to be informed on the process, and we like to see that the process is solid. When we see holes in the process and a nonchalant attitude from the White House, and even worse, a proactive effort to get rid of quarantines, which this was my other point, the fact that the federal government is now pushing back against the states and their rights to protect their own people, that should be a warning sign and a red flag to all you people out there who don't understand how big government can overreach and take control so quickly. I'm just laying that out there. But the fact of the matter is, that's freaky that they're proactively against a quarantine, a precautionary measure.
Well,
Caleb or Joe.
you know why the White House is doing it. According to Time magazine, is because the White House believes it represents putting politics over health policy.
Well, no, and see, that's the thing. Once again, they're doing this because they think it's a political thing. They only see in politics. You know, who is it? Ben Domenech who came up with the thing, politicize all the things. He always says that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, again, one of those things. They think in that mindset that everything is political. So they see it and they see, oh, this is bad. This isn't because it's good policy. It's because it's political. No, you have a political agenda. Governor of New Jersey, I don't think he's worrying about the politics or the optics of this, honestly. I think he just thinks a quarantine's a good damn idea.
Well, I don't know.
They're fairly open about this idea of politicizing everything. I mean, they say it at their conferences. You saw it up in Detroit, LaDuke and Aaron both. Yeah, they're pretty open about politicizing things on the left. I mean, it's sort of an open secret that their intent is to use every issue and let no crisis go to waste in order to get Democrats in office. I mean, remember when Salon, I think it was Salon, ran that article that said Mary Jo Kopechne's death was worth it because we got...
Yeah, jeez.
Remember that?
Yeah,
right, well, you know, Democrats are allowed to be completely and utterly awful people. We've seen it time and time again.
Anything is okay in pursuit of power. Right.
You're right. You're right. And this is the thing, though. LaDuke, what?
She would have felt her death was worth it.
That's right.
You're right. Yeah, of course. Now, here's the thing, though. We were talking earlier about religious freedom and religious liberty, and I meant to bring this up, and this is just a great spot to bring it in. We actually have a Republican candidate who was attacked for being Catholic. I mean, and it was a grotesque style of attack. It put him in like a pope's hat. It was absolutely sacrilegious. It was vile, yet they get away with this. Caleb,
I think it's funny historically. You remember who was famously questioned as a political candidate because of his Catholicism?
JFK.
JFK, that's right. So it's funny the way history loops around. But the difference then was it was more of a religious attack than a secular one. It was other branches of Christianity were concerned about. You know, it was Protestants basically were worried about him being Catholic.
Right.
Now it's the secularists who are worried not about him specifically being Catholic, just that he's religious, right? Because to them it's all the same.
Yeah, but today, I mean, for us who have had, you know, the experience of understanding that we have, what do we got, like 4 different Catholics on the Supreme Court now? We've had a Catholic president. I mean, we've had Catholics everywhere. We're not afraid of Catholics.
Michael Moore is Catholic.
Michael Moore is Catholic, right? Exactly. Nancy Pelosi's Catholic. What's there to be afraid of? But, you know, the fact that today we have these attacks still going on is disgusting. And, you know, the fact that it's coming from a Democrat is utterly unsurprising. Because, once again, the Democrat Party is the party that was anti-black, anti-Jew, they have always played on divisions of race, creed, color.
It's more than that, though. It's not just playing on
everything.
divisions. They've been saying for years they don't care if it's a division they're playing on or something else that they're playing on. Their primary goal is, I mean, they say it in Daily Kos diaries all the time, and people may think that doesn't matter, but those are the activists out there raising money.
That's right.
They say it all the time that any attack that is going to put people voting for Democrats instead of voting Republicans is okay. They say it and they mean it.
And they mean it because of the rules that they follow, the Alinsky style of politics that they conform to is ends justify the means. And as long as the end result is what you believe is progress, it doesn't matter what you did to get there. It doesn't matter if you killed a person. It does.
Progress.
What?
I don't even think they care about the progress. They have lost so much sight of their own goals.
Capital P. Capital P. Progress.
I know what you mean by progress. I'm saying I don't think that that's their goal. I'm saying that their only end goal is a Democrat being elected. They've lost sight of their own goals. All they care about is Democrats being in office.
That's because progressivism is at its essence only about collecting and consolidating power one single place, and that's D.C., and ultimately it'll lead to a dictator. That's what progressivism is.
That's what they basically want. I mean, you saw that video that Demi Moore put out when Obama got elected called I Pledge. Who's seen that?
Yeah, it basically, I pledge to be a lemming. I pledge to be a Nazi supporter who will walk right along with Obama, even if he decides that Jews need to be eradicated from this planet.
Although I don't think they actually said that in the video, just to be clear, Aaron.
Well, yeah, I didn't use quotes, so we should be good, right?
But it kind of ties back into, like, are you going LaDuke or me?
We're going to you now.
Go ahead, Joe.
Well, it ties back into basically everything else we've said today, in that the Democrats are all doing the same thing. They're all making the same attacks, the same personal attacks. Any level of attack is fine, but God forbid that a Republican does. And if any Republican says anything that the Democrat disagrees with, it's in essence projection. They're projecting what they do on anybody that disagrees with them, whether it be somebody's Catholic and therefore they must be the extremists, even though their views are the ones that are on the extreme side. Whether you say Dana Lash is taking the founders out of context when really it's them who do it all the time, and so they just assume that anybody disagrees. It's they're projecting all that on them. Every single thing they do is all about projecting their faults onto somebody else.
Yeah, and that, I mean, we see that all the time. We see this so much in the Colorado race. That's why I've been so, well, other than the fact that I live here, but I've seen it with the war on women. Mark Udall is an absolute extremist when it comes to abortion. He holds a position that 60% to 70% of Americans find abhorrent. I mean, late-term abortion, being able to have a baby come out of the birthing canal and then jamming an ice pick into the back of their skull. He supports that. No human being with any decency in them actually supports that. I mean, it's ridiculous. And that sort of extremism is why he thinks that it's extremism for the birth control pill to be sold over the counter. And that's why that gender gap crap is vanishing for him, and he's losing his seat in the Senate. Thank God.
Yes. Can I circle back around to something, if I may?
Yeah.
Thank you. You eloquently brought up about the White House and politicizing the Ebola thing, which I think that there's a very solid argument to be made about that, and about that they are trying to overtake the rights of the states. I am equally disturbed by the state of New Jersey basically taking a woman and imposing something that did not exist before she landed, and out of cloth making up rules and detaining her against her will. Now, if you heard her interview today on CNN, okay, she has been set aside in a tent. They're not telling her what they're doing, how long she's going to be held, under what authority they're doing this. And that is absolutely unconstitutional and should not be stood up for.
We already know you don't care about Ebola, so.
Chris, it has nothing to do with Ebola.
I have no idea what y'all are talking about.
Yeah, Chris Christie is acting like the thug that everybody has called him in the past 6 years. And so I'm not enthralled with what the White House's response is on this, but I'm sure as hell not enthralled with the states just coming up willy-nilly and making up law and saying, oh, by the way, this is what we're going to do. And if you listen to that...
But here's the thing. We don't even ever get to have that conversation about what is the appropriate use and how far we should allow it to go, because we have stupid stuff like a White House pushing back and saying, hey, it's no big deal. I hugged an Ebola patient, and I'm fine.
Just the White House. You're not allowed to have any questions because as soon as you have a question, all the calm down people are like, oh, quit panicking.
Exactly.
Okay, this is what I'm going to tell you guys to do. Go back and listen to this woman's interview. She was on CNN for about
I don't even know what story you're talking about.
Okay, the nurse who's being held in New Jersey right now in quarantine.
Didn't hear anything about it.
Landed Friday. And basically, Christie was like, "Oh, you know what? You need to be held over here." And as of noon today, when this interview aired, they had still not told her under what authority they were holding her on, how long she was going to be held, what the time frame was. They just basically set up a tent, threw her ass in there, and said, "Oh, by the way, we'll let you know, here's some pizza." If you guys aren't worried about that, you're not dealing with basically what government can do in the name of any emergency.
Well, I'll have to look the story up. I'm not going to go by your characterization.
Okay, well that's why I'm.
Here's the thing. I've seen different points of view on Twitter on this. I haven't looked into the story in any depth as far as that goes. But
are you sure this happened? Because I didn't hear it.
We have to find. What I'm saying is we have to find a balance.
All about it. It doesn't exist.
Can't even.
If I haven't heard about it, it basically didn't happen.
It did happen though.
It was on Twitter, Caleb. There was some discussion of it on Twitter.
I'm kidding, Aaron. Thank you.
And the thing of it is, what I was trying to say is, we don't ever even get to the discussion of what is the proper role because, like Caleb said, the discussion gets shut down at the very beginning because of a bunch of noodle-ass eggheads who want to. Yes, Thomas, I've been through this a million times.
For the past 3 weeks, that's all we've been hearing about is Ebola. There's no conversation being shut down. That's the imbecile to say that. That's all we've been hearing about.
All I've been hearing about is the panic about Ebola.
Yeah.
That's all I hear about.
Why is there
Every news story is about
Why is there a whole hashtag? Why is there a whole hashtag called Facts Not Fear? It's because the left decided that they could politicize this issue and make it to where the GOP was trying to fearmonger about Ebola. And we weren't. What we tried to do was we tried to talk about an outbreak that was occurring in Africa and had now been showing up here due to specific circumstances. And we talked about the processes and how the processes were not sufficient to keep everything good and to keep it calm. And we talked about from the very beginning how scientists were telling us that if you think you can get Ebola, you can't. We're talking about people like Vox who came out and said you can't get Ebola by riding on a bus with somebody or the subway with somebody. And they have no understanding of droplet precautions versus airborne precautions. And it pisses me off that now we're saying, oh, nobody's shutting down the conversation. That's crap. They've been shutting down the conversation from the beginning and calling anybody who thinks that this Ebola thing might be an issue a fearmonger and causing a panic.
Well, I've read more than enough on both sides about people talking out of their ass, basically saying that you could get this just sitting on a bus or a plane with somebody. There's not one documented case of that. Not one.
In America, there's not.
No, there's not one in Africa that they can find, but the reporting methods aren't nearly what they are here. But you know what I heard for the first week and a half, 2 weeks here? My God, if you got on a plane, somebody's sitting next to you, you could very well catch Ebola. And if you not,
what if they threw up on you?
Okay, that's what I read. That's what I heard. On our
what
side,
if they threw up on you, saying you can't catch it?
It's
they
true.
throw up on you.
Okay, so a person sitting next to you can't throw up on you?
You know what? If the plane crashes and then they throw up on you,
you so many times, LaDuke.
See, here's
What's
the
that?
thing. This is ridiculous.
I have thrown up on you so many times.
You're bringing up a complete
Ebola.
straw man. You're saying, oh, people said that you could get this. You can. You can. Just because nobody did doesn't mean they couldn't have. It's stupid,
my God.
and it's a straw man.
You could walk outside today and get hit by a meteorite. My God, don't go outside, Aaron.
That's not even the same type of probability. What I'm saying, no, it's not the same. If you
are bringing up something that has not happened. There have been 0 cases of that. 0. Let's deal with statistics. That's what you have to do.
Okay, well, let's deal with the reality of what the science says and what droplet precautions are. Do you know what droplet precautions are versus an airborne disease versus droplet precautions for a non-airborne disease?
Like you're going to, so go ahead.
No, droplet precautions are about any sneezing, any blood, any sort of mucus, any bodily fluid at all. Has a 3-foot circumference around your, has even sweat.
Like the flu.
Yes, and there's a 3-foot circumference around your body that it can live in, which means that your buffer zone needs to be about 4 to 5 feet. Now, I'm not just some dumbass talking out of my butt like you're insinuating we did for 3 weeks. I'm somebody who's actually looked at this and talked to experts who have dealt with it.
Everybody did, and you know what the experts call this? They call it a caregiver's disease. Why do they call it a caregiver's disease?
Because they're within that droplet precaution bubble, which you would be on a plane, which you would be on a subway, which you would be on a bus.
A caregiver gives care on a subway or a bus or a plane. Okay, we got that clear. This is a caregiver's disease.
It's a proximity thing. It's a proximity thing. It's not the. It doesn't make, just the fact that they're a nurse doesn't make them susceptible to the disease. It's the proximity that it puts them in place in.
Bingo, because they're dealing in fluids that are coming out of the people, like the guys are out in Yellowstone. Tell me where somebody has caught this outside of a hospital. Where?
West Africa.
Yeah, here in the United States of America, because when you're comparing Africa and the healthcare there to here, you're talking about a carnival in a parking lot to Disney. It's not even comparable. You want to talk about straw? That's what you're
right. You're right. Okay, fine. And a month ago, we would have said you could never have an American case here because it simply never happened. That's so because it's no. That's your logic. It simply hasn't happened, so it can't. That's your logic.
I think you guys are trying to avoid the football discussion that Joe and I are having.
Don't panic and just carry about your business. It's ridiculous.
When you have 4 people, okay, when you have 4 people that have this, all right, and with the type of coverage, I don't want to hear that people are being told to shut up and sit down. The coverage is nonstop. I mean, thank God that there were...
We're not saying that there's no coverage, though. You're missing the whole point of what we're saying.
You were saying that there was some organized effort to tell people to shut up and sit down and that it was working. It's not. It isn't. Every time.
No, that's bullcrap. You know what I've been talking about football for the last 10 minutes, but you know what they do? You know what they do for all this coverage on Morning Joe and Fox and Friends, and I guess CNN probably has a show on at that time, is they bring on someone from the administration and they have an interactive press release where the people who are the news readers say the questions that apply to the press release that the CDC put out, and then the CDC repeats their talking points, and that's the end of it. Nobody asks them real questions. You can call it coverage, but it's not coverage. It's just a bunch of people repeating everything that the government says.
There's no discussion. Just because there's coverage doesn't mean there's a discussion about what is the proper...
This is what bugs me,
Hey, let me say what I'm going to say.
You're creating a zero-sum game where either you can go, everything's fine, or you're a lunatic. There is a middle ground. A person who's writing about something has to have the leeway to ask questions. There is a middle ground. You should be allowed to ask questions. It doesn't mean, hey, let's panic, but a person should be able to say, can you get it on a plane without somebody else going, you're a fucking lunatic?
Okay, so in New York right now, where the doctor who is staying at Bellevue...
No comment on that at all.
Okay, if you want to believe what de Blasio said today in his press
conference. So no response to the fact that a person can't ask a question without being attacked as a lunatic.
Okay, where have you been attacked as a lunatic?
Right here on this show.
I've called you a lunatic.
Yes.
Okay, get the tape and reel it back to me. Where I called you a lunatic.
I was talking football with Joe. I missed it.
See, there we go. You see, today de Blasio comes out and basically says that nurses that serve at Bellevue, people in the community are basically shunning their families and them because they're freaked out that they're going to catch Ebola.
Oh.
All right. That's what's happening right now.
So?
All right. Because, well, that's not good.
Why?
Because you can't catch Ebola. Because you can't catch Ebola just because...
So for 21 days, some guy has to find something to occupy his time. Big deal.
Somebody that works in the 5th floor at Bellevue that isn't anywhere near this...
So what? So somebody gets 3 weeks of a little alone time.
No, it's going to go longer than that. What you're doing...
Why would it go longer? Why would it go longer? There's nothing to worry about.
Well, because, Aaron, you're misinforming people by saying that they're going to get something if they sneeze next to them.
So what?
No, I'm not. I'm not misinforming anybody. If someone with Ebola sneezed in your eye, you would probably have a high likelihood of getting Ebola.
If some
truth.
Big deal is.
It's science. I mean, sorry.
Where is it science? Give me the documented case.
I don't believe in science.
Look. You can look up virology, and you can have a field day about how communicable diseases pass, but I shouldn't have to explain to you that if there's Ebola in mucus, if there's Ebola virus in mucus and it goes into a mucus membrane on your body, it can transfer the disease. You don't got to be a fucking rocket scientist to know this.
Let me ask you this: Is Ebola
the first time I've cussed on air ever? So just so you know,
what is a rock scientist?
Like the flu? Is Ebola? Can you catch Ebola like the flu? Aaron?
Not necessarily. It's not. No, it's not the same thing. Can you?
Okay.
I mean, can I ask you a question? Can you stop a car with your penis? I mean, if we're gonna ask non sequiturs, I want to know.
Can you catch AIDS like the flu?
Can you catch AIDS like the flu?
No.
So you should have no concern.
So then no reason to worry about it then.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of funding we can get back.
Absolutely. I'd love to see the CDC redirect some stuff. But yet
there you have it, people. Thomas LaDuke hates AIDS patients.
Why? I didn't say anything about AIDS.
Well, you just said that we can cut the funding.
No, you just basically asked one of those questions like maybe I'll call it a straw man. Can you stop a car with your penis? I don't know what the hell that had to do with anything.
Well, it had to do with your non sequitur about whether or not Ebola can be transmitted like the flu.
Yeah.
Why does it matter?
Because a lot of people out there are under the misinterpretation that it can be transmitted like the flu, and it can't. It hasn't been proven.
Well, let me tell you this: the flu can be transmitted like Ebola.
Okay. So there are a lot of dead people in the United States.
I still don't see what any of this has to do with the ability of a reporter to ask a question without suffering ridicule. It's their job to ask questions.
Show me where a reporter...
You're ridiculing it right now. If you're going to say that you're not, you're ridiculing it right now. That's exactly what you're doing. You've been doing it for 3 weeks. Everyone who asks a question is called
when the question was about the proper role and size of the response by government. We're not even discussing the actual question because you're talking about the panic.
When you have news channels that are documented to do 40 to 45 minutes on something that 4 people have caught and 1 person has died, I think that's a little bit oversaturation. If you don't agree with my term on that, that's fine.
You're right. You're right. But the problem is what they're reporting. The problem is that they're not having a discussion of what the response should be.
These are all separate. Saturation is a whole separate issue. There was saturation coverage of the missing Malaysian jet, but nobody was worried it was going to cause a panic. I mean, were you suddenly afraid you might stumble into a missing jet in your backyard? I mean, there was just too much worry.
That would have been awesome.
I was a little bit afraid of that.
I wasn't worried because I wasn't getting on a Malaysian jetliner.
Well, then you shouldn't be worried about this.
I can go back and pull up people on our side saying this could mutate and it would be like the flu. Yeah, it could. You know what? Every person that I've read that's an expert in this said it's probably not going to do that because it hasn't done it yet.
If a reporter goes on television and says, will it mutate like the flu, then they're doing their job. Their job is not to make you feel comfortable. Their job is to ask the questions of the people who are in authority. There's nothing wrong with a reporter or a blogger writing a post or asking the question. There's nothing wrong with that.
And here's the thing. If the answer from the CDC is no, it cannot mutate and infect you like the flu.
Then you've actually helped people.
Right. Or they're lying. We've been discussing the fact that you can't have a discussion about this. You know, listen, stop interrupting and listen to what I said. No, we didn't comment at all about what the proper role of government is in this. We talked the whole time. We've been talking about the saturation of the media and the scaremongering by the media.
I want to know the statistics on aneurysms because I think LaDuke just had one.
So what's the proper role, LaDuke?
You want to have a discussion that basically is fact driven. And right now what we have is there are a lot of people out there that think that a lot of people are going to come down with Ebola, and statistically, that's not going to happen here.
Who thinks that?
I will pull up all of the comments on Facebook that I've seen of people.
Oh my God! Facebook comments.
Yeah,
Facebook
exactly.
Comments. Really?
Well, you know what?
There's also a lot of Facebook comments that think Obama is a Muslim antichrist. Something or other.
Yeah, Aaron, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Can you stop posting that on my Facebook wall?
Well, hey, man, I try to get the truth out there.
For the very same thing that you talked about the president and the federal government overstepping their bounds, Chris Christie just did it in New Jersey. And I
believe you. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
I'm not sure.
But I don't think that's
stepping over the bounds.
Media.
But the principle is the same.
But here's the thing.
Aaron and I are arguing two different points. You two are talking about the government. I'm talking about the media and their responsibility.
I'm talking about both of them.
Okay, well, they're two separate issues in my opinion. I think they are separate issues.
Well, no, because Chris Christie is reacting because of the media, not because of what medical professionals are telling him. Because today, throughout the day...
Have you known Chris Christie in his career to craft his policy based on the media?
Absolutely. Loves that.
Here's what I think people are reacting to. I think people are reacting to the fact that
he's a thug who doesn't care what people think.
Hey guys,
right now.
What I think people are reacting to, and what's really probably causing the most unrest, is the fact that we have people who should know better coming back from places where they were exposed to Ebola or could have potentially been exposed to Ebola, not self-quarantining and not self-checking. This guy who went and went out to eat, went out bowling, and I mean all this stuff. You came back from a hot zone. I understand that you want life to go on and you don't want to spend 21 days in a government quarantine. If that's the case, be responsible. Stay out of massive public areas for a while until you're in the clear. Have some self.
That's right. I don't think there would be a public outcry for quarantining caregivers who are coming back from Africa if we hadn't already seen irresponsible behavior by caregivers.
Yes.
He immediately, upon getting...
Oh, come on. You're not going to argue this guy was acting responsibly.
Well, no, he did.
He did not. He was out in public and was doing stuff.
If you're worried about people causing a panic, it is just as easy to cause a panic the way he did. He is responsible if there is a panic just as much as the news is. He's the one that decided to go out in public. Okay. He could have had the wherewithal to say, well, I'm probably not contagious, but you know what? People worry about stuff like this, and maybe I won't give them an extra thing to worry about, and I'll stay at home for a few days because I don't want to be an ass. He could have done that.
Right. And that goes back to my point about people being selfish, stupid, and dirty. That's how this thing spreads. Selfish, stupid, and dirty.
I'm just saying, if you're talking about a panic, acting like a self-important, smarter-than-you jerk is probably a good way to cause a panic. He could have stayed home. He didn't have to go bowling. Was it that critical? He could have said, well, you know what, I'm not going to infect anybody, but probably people are going to be a little uncomfortable.
Well, the majority of people probably didn't know that he was over in Africa for a month and a half, whatever he was.
He knew, don't they? He knew. He should have been. Look here.
There is not.
LaDuke. You want to liberty. You believe in the American system.
Why would you object? Why would you object to a healthcare worker just staying at home for a few days? Why would you object? If it keeps people calm, if you're the one that's so worried about panic, why not try to avert a panic by just not acting like a douchebag?
Okay, first off, it's not a few days, it's 21.
That's a few days.
Okay, that's 3 weeks. All right. Number two.
And I was at boot camp for 3.5 months.
And you know what? And you looked good afterwards, I'm sure. Number two, you are not contagious until you start showing...
Doesn't matter. That's not what I asked you. What's the harm in him staying home? What's he losing? He doesn't get to go bowling? I mean, cry me a river.
Here's the thing, Caleb, I'm gonna stop this here because we are 20 minutes over time. LaDuke, I'm gonna leave you with this thought, and here it is. If we can't pull off a self-quarantine, we can't pull off self-governance. And that's where I'm at on this issue. And that's why I don't trust the people who are coming back, because they're not capable of self-quarantining to the extent that they should, because they have these lives and they have these entitlements and they need to do this and that and the other thing. And they don't respect self-governance to the extent that they need to. And because of that, we're going to end up with government intrusion that you don't like because stupid people like this guy went out and decided that the protocols that everybody else has to follow shouldn't apply to him.
We're honestly going to make the intellectual argument that people who are going over to Africa and donating their time to help stop it there are coming back and being selfish assholes because they're basically going by the guidelines?
Just because somebody does a good deed doesn't mean that they can't also be selfish in a different circumstance.
Okay. So with this now, let's see how many people volunteer to go over there now.
Right, because they're so selfish that the 21-day wait period is not worth the life of a person in Africa. Is that what you're saying? That these people are so admirable that faced with the prospect of not going bowling for 3 weeks, they're going to give up on their idea of helping dying people.
Yeah. They're willing to risk contracting Ebola.
You know what?
They're not willing to risk missing the bowling league.
I was going to go help with Ebola, but then I found out I couldn't bowl for 3 weeks, so screw it.
All right, just see. Because basically,
I mean, that's what you're saying. Is that not what you're saying?
They know how the disease.
Are you saying that or not?
No, I'm not saying that. You're putting words.
So so you're saying
logic.
You just said that people are going to not want to go because of this.
The majority, yeah, because the majority of the people that go over there, they come back and there's no problem. And they're responsible enough, evidently, that if they do come down with symptoms, which then means that they're possibly...
They're not responsible enough because, here's the thing. We've had a lot of people from Doctors Without Borders who have come back with this and actually hurting their college recruiting.
You seem to be forgetting one fact, LaDuke. He actually did have Ebola.
And he reported himself...
Okay, but he did have it, so saying there's no reason for him not to go out because he probably doesn't have it doesn't even apply in this case because, in fact, he did have it.
He didn't have it during the first 7
He did have it during the first 6 hours. He just wasn't contagious.
No, he didn't. He didn't report himself until he came down with the symptoms.
He still had it,
yeah,
but you got it in Africa.
You don't know exactly when you trigger a freaking fever. I'm sorry, but you don't feel it immediately. And the idea that he was definitely self-monitoring and taking his temperature every hour is bullshit.
LaDuke is right that he was not contagious, but that's not the question. The question is, did he have it? And yes, he had it.
He didn't have it until he basically came down with the symptoms.
He had Ebola. He just wasn't symptomatic.
He just wasn't contagious.
They can take a test and it won't show up. So technically, you don't have it.
That's because the antibodies haven't built up yet. That's not because you don't have it.
Well, but what I'm saying is that they can test, and you could go 21, 28, however many days. My God, I've heard that it's go up to 45 days. That's how much misreporting there is out there. So
this doesn't mean you don't have it. It doesn't follow you from Africa and lurk around your apartment waiting for a good time to spring on you.
I'm surprised I haven't read that yet.
It's in you when you get it. It's inside you. He brought it back inside of his body. It didn't come back in his luggage and wait for an opportune moment.
It probably did, though. I'll wait to read that part later on this week.
All I'm saying is, if you're asking people who are doctors to come back from Africa to not go bowling for a few days, I mean, boo-hoo.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look here.
It's just not that big of a deal. If people stay calm for the 7 or 8 weeks that this is even going to be an issue, then just give it to them. Just do it. Be a nice person. Why do you have to be a dick? Well, I'm going bowling and I'm not contagious because I'm a smart doctor. Just stay home. Don't be a dick.
Yeah. When you fly to Hawaii, if you have a dog, that dog has to stay in a quarantine for a certain number of days before you're allowed to bring it into Hawaii, just so you don't introduce any non-native diseases to the animal life there. If we can manage to do that for a vacation in Hawaii, if Barack Obama can manage to do that, which he does, he sends little Bo over on an airplane separately and puts them through quarantine before they ever show up. If we can manage to do that, these doctors should be able to, suck it up and self-quarantine.
Besides, this isn't 1850.
21 days.
It means you're home with your Xbox and your internet and your cell phone and your DVR. I mean, come on. Go power watch some Netflix and give me a break.
And you can even have everything you need delivered to you. Delivered to your front door. You don't even have to open the door and expose anybody in the process.
And look, if you step out front to stop a car with your penis periodically, I think that's fine too.
Brings a whole new meaning to stick shift. So, that is the Red State Weekly Briefing for this week. We went about a half hour over, but hey, who doesn't love a little bit of extra? I know I love a little bit of extra. Thomas LaDuke,
yeah, we've heard that about you.
Find you at?
That'd be LaDuke at FTRradio.com and Irish Duke 2 on the Twitters.
Joseph Esquire.
You can find me at Josie Esquire on Twitter and on the front page of RedState, and I can stop a car with my penis.
That is excellent. Caleb, where can everybody find you, and why do you have a beanie on?
I'm currently in a self-quarantine in an underground bunker.
And why do you have a beanie on?
I was outside in the cold, and I look ridiculous when I take it off, and I didn't have time.
Oh,
so you violated your quarantine.
Yes, yes. He went outside and violated his quarantine. He's a selfish bastard. That is Caleb.
Well, I had to go bowling. I mean, I think there has to be some...
Right, exactly. So that is the Red State Weekly Briefing. I'm your host, Aaron Gardner, managing editor of RedState.com. Just to let you know, we are going to be having a special election night coverage on election night this year. We're going to be starting a half hour before the close of the polls in the East Coast and closing whenever the West Coast can be called. We're going to have Ace of Spades headquarters people here on the scene with us, calling the races before the AP. We're also going to have personalities from around the United States and different Senate races that are in play coming on and joining us. And the next day after the election, there's a special conference call for conservative activists that Eric Erickson and the Red State contributors are going to be holding. Go to redstate.com. You'll see a big red banner at the top of redstate.com, which displays the link for signing up and registering for the conference call. So please go there and register for the after-election activism conference call. Red State Weekly Briefing. My name is Aaron Gardner. Thank you so much for joining us again. Appreciate it. Bye. Kick that music.
Oh, I don't have it.
Oh, you
I'm mad at you, Aaron. He's not going to play your music.
See?
No, it's my music, and I just didn't have it set up. I'm not mad at him. I know he's stupid.
But are you going to be able to stop a car with your penis? That's the real question.
Well, I think Joe's right. If you don't get that on at least some T-shirts and everything, you've probably failed at life.
I'm going to take one more shot at you, LaDuke. One more shot.
We're about to kill the broadcast, though. We got people are leaving
here.
No, we're about to go off the air. I haven't gone off yet. I figured why not just roll with it.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, we're gone.